Hello, welcome to another edition of That Millwall podcast. Today we have the return, series two, the next edition of Who Are You? The series went pretty well last year. We had a few guests come on and we've revived it. I'm joined tonight by our first guest of the new season, Mr.
All
Rob
good, mate.
Woodford.
Yeah,
Rob,
looking
how are
forward to
you?
this. Yeah, it's nice to be able to come back onto Mickey's show again. I was on a while before and plugged my tour, and I should do so again before we finish. All right.
That's absolutely fine. Plug away, mate. Plug away. This is an opportunity for us to speak to the Millwall fans far and wide, people that we may not necessarily get to engage with. You would have seen the show last season. Obviously, we've brought it back this time, and Rob is our first guest this year. So, Rob, without further ado, take us away.
Well, I
Tell us a
live
little
in
bit about
Medway,
yourself.
and I don't know whether you're aware that the ME8 postcode has got more Millwall supporters than Gillingham fans. So it's obviously a mass exodus from southeast London when the docks closed down. But I grew up in South London, and my first game at the Old Den was in 1964. I can't remember it too well. I can remember sitting on my dad's shoulders on the halfway line, looking at Millwall draw with Torquay United 2-2 in the fourth division. Now, there's one for you youngsters, the fourth division. They call it League Two now. We played in that division for a couple of seasons. But this game, nobody knew it at the time. We attended a game which was the very first of 59 home games without defeat because we were successful in promotion in consecutive seasons.
Yeah.
But if you know the history of Millwall Football Club, then you know that one. And currently,
And I
well,
mean,
I'm a season ticket holder, but work-wise, I'm a tour
yeah.
guide in London. Love it, and we'll come on to that later on.
I'm sure we will. And I mean, you said there, obviously, your first game was with your dad. I'm going to assume, was it always going to be Millwall,
Yeah,
following in your
I was
dad's
hooked,
footsteps?
because those days in the 1960s, we had what was called the Raw. You know, each of the terraces tried to outroar each other. You know, it's different docks. Workers from different docks tended to go on different terraces, and the noise it created, it was just incredible. There was not going to be any other team for me. And I do remember when I was at school, I went to school at Streatham, and a mate of mine, Palace fan, uh, Alan, he said to me, Rob, you always go to the Den. Why don't you come to Sellers Park next weekend? Come and see some real football. I thought, oh, well, I'll do it, just to please him. And then I come out of the ground afterwards and I said to him, look, I'm sorry, but the atmosphere here is like the waiting room of a doctor's surgery compared to what we have at the Den. And Alan was crestfallen. And look, I know they make a noise now, but they're in the Prem, aren't they? They've been for a few years. But back then, there was no atmosphere. And the other grounds I went to, Charlton was the same.
And you said just before there that your first game was against Torquay. I know you can't quite remember it. What do you remember? What was your first sort of memories and impressions of the Den
To be honest, the
that
first
atmosphere?
memories with the blue and white kit, the striped kit, which was revived, wasn't it? When we
Hmm.
got to the playoff final a few years ago when Morrow scored in the dying
Yeah.
seconds. I mean, that was revived. Thicker stripes, but the kit we wore then was memorable. You're going to ask me, I'm sure, what my favourite kit was. That's up there. It wasn't my favourite, but certainly was the first memory.
And I mean, in terms of obviously the old Den, where was you based? Did you move around? Did you have a particular home or
Yeah.
a spot, or was you one that travelled sort of around
Yeah,
the ground?
went to various places, including, and again, you've got to be of a certain age to remember what was there before the forecourt seats. The forecourt seats, I think they went in about late 60s. It was just a slope, um, and was there for a while. Dog track end because there was no segregation then. There was no away fans, but eventually settled on what was the corner in between the halfway line and the cold blow lane end. There was a section of the terrace which had a wall behind it, and I used to stand up there, sort of behind the floodlight pylon, if you like, and eventually, towards
Hmm.
the end, the last few days at the Den, that became a family enclosure. But that was a very good vantage point there. My, my favourite place in the ground, actually.
And in terms of the old ground, there's a lot of nostalgia when supporters speak about what the old Den was like, and what it may have been like for visiting teams and visiting supporters. What would you say is your memories of the old ground? Was it that intimidating place that most
It
people
certainly
say
was
it
in the
was?
late 60s and early 70s. When we were relegated eventually, it wasn't didn't have quite the same um, atmosphere because the gates were so low, and
Hmm.
it was one season where the gate for the FA Youth Cup final was higher than the previous Saturday's attendance, which was something like 4 or 5 thousand. It was so low. But no, it was the 60s and 70s were for me. They were the best years. Yeah.
And sort of bringing it forward to the current day. I don't always like referring to it as the new Den now. We've been there for 30 years. It's now just to me the Den. What are your impressions? Do you like the ground? And you said you're a season ticket holder.
Block four,
Whereabouts do you sit?
okay. Really good view. Some of my mates are in the CBL, and I can see a much better game than them because they're sending half-time reports, so they're watching a different game. So it's all about where you sit and what you can see, and if you can read the game, And it was going to the new Den. The biggest shock, I suppose, for all of us was going to the toilet. It's no longer the swimming and diving club like the other place was, and there were some parts of the old Den where you had ascensions in the way if you depending on where you stood, but there was none of that at the new ground.
I think, obviously, from what I've heard from these doing these shows and talking to other supporters, I think the biggest thing is that we built or the new ground was built, and I think it had a lot to do with we were one of the first, if not the first ground built after one of the disasters, and the fact that at the time it was so new and modern, it was so different from where we'd come from before. I would imagine there'd been people that have been going to the old day like yourself for 30 years, then all of a sudden going into this
It
shiny
was
new
a bit of a
arena.
shock to the system. And the biggest regret, I suppose, is that if you go to where the old Den was now, it's a it's a modern housing estate, and there's no reference.
Mm,
Um, None of the
no.
streets are named after former people associated with the club. It's a bit of a shame, really, because we was there for a long time, from um, 1910 to 1993. That's 83 years of our history, and there's you can't go there.
Mm,
Even the local authority plaque that was put up. I mean, that's been up a couple of times and it's been nicked. Um, you go to see, you go walk down Coldblow Lane, and the the name of the road, the sign has been nicked as well. So, but it would have been nice to have had some recognition in the names of the blocks or the streets, but there's nothing.
mm. No, it's one of those, like, if you know, and people, it's passed down generations, that people, as you walk past, if you're walking around that kind of area, you'd say, oh, this is where the old ground was.
Yeah,
So if you know, you know, but if you didn't
you'd
know,
have no
there's
idea.
no, as you
You'd have
say,
to
there's no
have somebody
reference to it.
there
No.
to explain where it was and what it was like, because you just
Mm,
walking down there, you'd have absolutely no idea whatsoever. Even one of the railway arches is gone.
no. Moving away from the ground to more into individuals. Been following the club a long time. You've probably seen some fantastic players play in a Lions shirt? It's probably a hard question when there's so many to choose from, and I'll give you the opportunity to perhaps name an honourable mention or two. But who's your
Well,
favourite all-time player?
there's a few that come to mind, and most of my favourite players were from that period I was talking about, the late '60s, early '70s. Um, Keith Weller was one, Derek Posse was another, obviously Barry Kitchener. But for me, my favourite all-time player was Harry Cripps, and I've had it. I, I have heard his name mentioned by younger people as Barry Cripps, but no, it was Harry Cripps. But
And for some of the listeners who perhaps, even myself as a host here, who perhaps never got to see the great man play, what
he
was he like?
epitomised the spirit of Millwall Football Club. You know, you asked me who my favourite player was. That is that right? He wasn't necessarily our best player by a long, long
Hmm.
way, but Harry
Hmm.
epitomised Millwall Football Club. It's never say die attitude, and he always had that bit of a. It was all a bit of fun with Harry. You know, he'd pinch a few yards for a free kick where the referee wasn't watching. You know, and sometimes he'd go up to the referee and try to referee the game for him. You know, he's a little bit of a comedian, and I, I'll never forget this. Sitting in the forecourt seats, Stephen, you might have to edit this bit, but I'm going to go for it. All right, yeah. We were playing a team called Birmingham City at the time,
Hmm.
and one of their midfield players was a guy called Trevor Hockey. Everybody knew Trevor Hockey because he had this beard, right? Good player. So Harry was going in for a tackle down on the touchline by the forecourt seats, and somehow Harry bundled him into the forecourt seats. He had this way of bundling players, and but what a gentleman he was. He was very apologetic to Trevor Hockey. He stepped over the forecourt seat wall. He put one hand on his beard, the other on his bollocks, and just threw him straight back onto the park. And gentlemanly thing to do, you know. You don't forget things like that.
Absolutely. And again, if you no, you don't. There's certain memories and things like that that you stick with you kind of forever. I'm going to go a little bit rogue though, because you said there that I asked you your
Yeah,
favourite player, which I did, and you mentioned that I never asked who our
yeah,
best player was. So I'm going to put you on the spot now. And in your opinion, who's the best
yeah.
player
Well,
you've
I'm
ever
old
seen in
enough
a
to
Millwall
remember
shirt?
Keith Weller. He was head and shoulders above the rest. You know, R.I.P.
Mm,
For me, he was outstanding. He was a midfield general. He could also score goals. Now,
hmm
you know, if you look back over those 50 plus years, we don't have too many midfield players that can contribute to the score sheet as well. You know, they're they're a rarity. You know,
mm,
younger fans can remember people like Alex Ray. Go back a little bit before him.
hmm
Nicky Chatterton got a lot of goals for midfield, but a lot of them were penalties. Um, you get a midfield goal scorer, Tim Cahill, another one. Um, you know,
hmm
they're half a team on their own if you could do that. But it's finding them, isn't it? You know, at the level we are now,
mm.
it's finding them at the right price. Try to get a rough diamond and polish him up. It's not easy. Not on our budgets.
And also the ability to be able to keep them
Yeah.
as well, because once you reach a certain level, of goals and assists, or the statistics that the bigger Premier League clubs look for,
Oh, for
it's very
sure. You know,
difficult for clubs like us to
no, no,
hold
no,
on to
no.
those
One of
type
my
of
favourite
players.
players in recent years was Jimmy Abdou. Now, what an engine! But if he could pass the ball, he wouldn't
Mm,
have been with us for long because he would have been snapped up. You know.
no, absolutely. It's one of those, isn't it, where we it's a bit harsh sometimes to say it, but sometimes the players we get, you can on their day they're absolutely world class, but there's a reason why they don't, or they're not perhaps playing at the next level. Whether it be a technical thing, whether it be
Yep.
consistency, injury record, there's always something that perhaps prevents them. But years gone by, obviously we've had players over the years that perhaps were at the time of the standard that really did take us to different
So
levels.
don't get me started on Zian
Sticking with
Fleming, will you?
individuals,
Because we should have taken the money. All right. And Casper De Nori is
I'm
a
very much in
fantastic
agreement.
find. Whoever went and found him, but other teams are working out how to play him now. So it's not easy, is it?
On that, I'm going to change the order of how we run here. We're keeping with players in the current squad. You've touched on two players there. I think Casper Denore is absolutely outstanding. Who would you say is probably your favourite? Who's your fan favourite at the
Well, if
moment
only
in
he
the
could get a
current
game,
bunch?
Romain Esse, because he's the future. You know, he the ability he's got for a young player. It reminds me, you've got to go all the way back to Gordon Hill. Very, very sort of similar. We had a real star. Obviously, we didn't hang on to Gordon Hill. Um, the time had to come. But having spoken to Romain at the awards dinner at the end of last season, I got a feeling he's going to stay with us for a long time. That's my gut feeling. Just get him in the team.
Funny enough, just on Remain, I played in one of the charity games over the summer, and the guy who was organising it kind of said, "Oh, we've got a special guest to come in and say hello to you." I'm thinking, oh, yeah, all right. And it was Remain himself. He happened to be at the ground and come in and met us all, and someone he just a breath of fresh air. Someone that young that just he loves it. He loves his football. He's enjoying his time at Millwall. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know where he's going to end up, but I certainly agree. I think he is the
Sure,
future
he's a
and
good
someone
lad and
who's
well
got
grounded. I mean,
bundles of talent.
obviously,
We just need to see
you
it.
know, money changes everything, and agents change everything. But let's
Hmm.
uh, let's get 3 or 4 years out of him first.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. In terms of coming away from the playing staff, we'll go to managers. Have a feeling I know your answer to this question, but I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to let you speak. Who's your favourite manager
It,
of all
look,
time?
you can't go any further than Benny Fenton. Is that the one you were going to think about?
It was one of two,
So, so the
believe it
other
or
one
not.
would
It
have
was
been
one
Kenny
of two.
Jackett, right? No, no.
It
So
wasn't. No,
I,
that's
I, I,
interesting.
I kind of look at longevity in the league. I
Hmm.
mean, Benny Fenton kept us in the second tier of English football for 9 seasons. That nobody's done that before. Well, we've had
Mm,
we've had 3 seasons, five
no.
seasons, 6 seasons. I mean, we would normally have gone back by now. We've gone through the cycle. We should have been relegated
Mm,
under normal conditions already, but we haven't had one manager in that time. We've had 3 managers and one caretaker manager in the last 7 seasons. But Benny Fenton, he kept us there for 9 seasons. I mean, we take that now from one manager, won't we?
absolutely, and I think it's very much underplayed and undervalued. Again, Rowett to a certain extent. Keeping a club like ours at a certain level where let's face it, we do predominantly punch above our weight
Yep.
in the second tier of English football. So 9 years is a phenomenal achievement. As you said, usually in the cycle we would have gone back down by now. So I think there's a lot. Modern football is all about success and all about winning, and people want success like that. They don't want to wait for it. They want to be challenging. They want to be winning titles. When you know that you're a club that perhaps can't compete financially or have the bigger grounds like some of the take Leicester and Leeds for example at the moment in the Championship, you just have to you just sometimes have to take credit off to say look, people do a fantastic job when they do it over a long
Yeah,
period of
the,
time.
the, the only difference between the late 60s and early 70s and now is it's a much uneven playing field now, where teams that are
Mhm.
relegated from the Premier are rewarded for failure with shitloads of money, and that's not fair, is it? Really, not clubs like
Mm.
us and Rotherham United and the rest of us that are down there struggling. It's like uh,
Hmm.
you know we can't go and look at the summer, all right? Social media is full of oh, we've got Nisbet now. We're going to tear up the league. We'll be in the top six. Oh, come on, it don't work like that. You've got to look around and see the money that other teams are spending. 1.52
Mm.
million doesn't buy you much in the championship now, does it? Not really.
No, it doesn't. I must admit, I actually thought we'd probably see a little bit more out of Nisbet, a bit we'd have a little bit of a better return than perhaps what we've got. But that's right. You look at some of the money that's spent and some of the players that are playing in the Championship at the moment. I mean, most of Leicester's team would probably get a
Right,
game
right.
in the Premier League. Leeds' front four probably would all walk into a Premier League side as well. But that's the thing, isn't it, with football? And that's what makes, I think, Millwall as a club um, so special, because we do constantly. And I've always said this. I don't. I used to get frustrated when Neil Harris used to say, we're the underdogs, we're the underdogs, and
Yeah,
that was his mantra, and that's fine, that's okay, but we've shown that perhaps we are a little bit better than that, but we also do have to realise that there does come a point where we have to accept that sometimes a little bit of hard work might have to go
yeah,
in rather than the
yeah. No,
talented
you've got
players
to
who are
be
on the squad.
consistently good at this level to get a top half finish,
Mm,
which I think we've done for the last 4 seasons, haven't we?
absolutely, and that's where Gary Rowett, I think, may not go down as the most popular manager, but he'll certainly go down as someone in many people's book as a manager that managed to bring stability and
Yeah, I mean,
some
did you
hope,
not think there might have been
shall we
some
say.
message coming right from the top? I don't care how we play, just keep us in this league. There might be a bit of that to it as well,
Mm.
because to go down again,
Hmm.
you look at the teams that are in the third tier now and struggling to get back.
Hmm.
It won't be a walk in the park.
Well,
No, we'll look at
Charlton and
Charlton. Yeah,
Portsmouth. Think of
yeah. We laugh at Charlton,
no,
don't we? Yeah, yeah.
they've
And
been
and
down
it's
there
not
for a long
fair them
time.
being down there, is it? Because it costs us 6 points every season. It's like having a 6 point deduction, isn't it?
Absolutely. Um, Going away from best and favourites and the top players, I'm going to combine this into two. Worst player you've seen in a Millwall shirt and worst player that you've seen play at the
Uh,
Den.
the worst player is a goalkeeper, and I hope Kingy's listening to this. Because don't worry, Kingy, it's not you. You were the best goalkeeper we ever had. There's a guy called Pat Cuff who only played for Millwall maybe, I don't know, 50, 60 appearances, and he's from the northeast. And most of the other teams he played for were all in the northeast, so obviously he didn't settle down here. And to be honest, he's absolute shite. He just didn't have any confidence. You've got to have confidence in a goalkeeper. And this guy used to come out for crosses,
Hmm.
flapping like a pair of underpants in the wind. It's incredible. He's dropping balls all over the place. Um, George Petchy, not one of your best signings, R.I.P. But no, he was the worst player I ever saw in a Millwall shirt. You didn't see that coming, did you?
And again, no, no, but it's interesting because different. So many people see things in a different way, or use have different reasoning for the word. Sometimes it's a striker that scored sort of 1 in 30 or whatever. Or it's a goalkeeper or a defender that scored a couple of own goals. It's interesting to hear that what goes into the decisions of
Yeah.
best and worst. Sometimes it's completely bonkers things that people kind of come up with.
Oh,
So,
for sure. And then
um,
when you see a player that
coming away
is
from players.
consistently poor, you don't get that out of your head, and you think, oh, that's it. I'm never going to like this guy. Do you know? Robert Wilson was
Hmm.
one. We signed him 70s, I think 70s or early 80s. He was another player, good player for Fulham, but didn't do much for us. But no, Pat Cuff, he was the worst.
And coming away from now players back to the club in general, what would you say is your most memorable match involving Millwall?
Not at the old Den, not at the new Den, anywhere.
Anywhere, yeah, it can be any competition. It could be a friendly
No, no, no,
if
no, no.
that's what you
Now
think.
there'd be
It could be
so
anything,
many
you know.
people that give the same answer, and I'm not gonna go anywhere different. It was the semi-final of the FA Cup at Old Trafford. Well, it was a magical day, you know.
Mm. You just even thinking about it, you just it it still fills me with disbelief that Tim
Yeah,
Cahill scored that goal and
sure,
it was enough,
sure,
and
and
it's just
well,
incredible.
Dickie should have made it too, but you know, and think was the second half. I don't actually remember a lot about the second half. I spent so much time looking up at those digital clocks above where we were sitting to see how much time we had to go. Because you know, being Millwall, you know
Mm,
this ain't going to end well. You know, uh, but
no,
that was
it's
awesome.
just
That was a really special. That was more special in many ways than the actual final.
what I was going to say.
Yeah.
That was our final. I think the semi-final was our final. We knew, look, provided unless there was going to be an almighty miracle of beating Manchester United or Arsenal,
Oh
our
yeah, you
final
know, it was that day,
was
and
that
there
day
was
at Old
12 of us that went
Trafford.
up in a limo that day to Cardiff. We felt so special. And then when we got to the
Nice.
street where the driver parked us up, we got out, and there was loads of limos. You know, we weren't just the special ones. It was hilarious, really.
Um, Interestingly, possibly the same answer for this one, but what would you say is your best or favourite
No,
Millwall
it's not a
moment?
moment. It's a second. It's 1 second. It was when Paul Durkin blew that whistle in that same match. And I don't know whether was you there. Yeah. Yeah. Do you remember it
Hmm.
was raining just before
Yeah.
the final
Hmm.
whistle went? And when he
Hmm.
blew the whistle, the sun come out.
Hmm. That yeah, it
That
it's
to me,
just
that not a
yeah,
moment. It's that
and
second
that's the
when he
thing, isn't
blew
it?
the
It's a
whistle
second.
because he was taking an age to blow it, as far as I'm concerned.
It's funny, isn't it? Because uh, similar to what you just said there. A couple of weeks ago, I was at Watford, and we'd scored quite late on, and I had my watch on. I'm looking at the clock literally, and it moves a couple of seconds, and you're thinking, right, okay, we haven't got long to go. And you look again, and you look again, and you look again, and you can't help
Yeah,
it at foot when it's so close. If you're sort of 3 or 4 nil up, you don't really care because you know you're going to win the game anyway. But it just yeah, that those seconds that you know time had stopped. It had just stopped, didn't it, in that second half, and that moment of just and the I think it was the sort of oh my god, we've done
yeah,
it feeling. That to me, I
yeah,
won't ever
yeah.
forget that.
To get to an FA Cup
That
final, it's
we're actually
just
in the FA Cup final.
unreal. It's not us, is it? You know, and then if you come on my Millwall history and heritage tour in March, you get to find out how we nearly did it in the year 1900, 1903, and 1937.
Well, that is an interesting topic of conversation because, and I'm going to let you take away at this point. I believe the podcast boys are we're looking at sorting out doing a tour with yourself. I believe Mickey has been talking to you about it. I think most of the group, if not all of the group, has replied to say that they would be interested in coming along. But if you would you like to sort of interject at this point and
Yeah,
tell the
first of
fans
all,
a little
I
bit more
don't think
about it?
Mickey wants to come out in the cold, right? So it won't be till it gets a little bit warmer. Um, so what happens is,
He did say that, but I didn't want to throw him under the bus.
yeah,
You have, not me. So
um, it happens. Most international breaks, we have a. I think we've done
mhm.
7 or 8 now. Uh, most of them have sold out. Some have been close to sell out. We start off at West India Dock, um, where much of the Millwall fan base would have been working in the 1880s, and we take a walk back through time.
Mhm.
So we go to the site of the old Morton's Canning factory. We go to all the previous 4 football grounds. Change the route a little bit because when we used to stop halfway in the George pub, which was a former headquarters of Millwall Athletic, as we were known then, this was a half time in the pub. And just because it was half time, they weren't in the pub sucking oranges. They was down in pints, and you couldn't get them out for the second half of the walk. So we changed it now, and we finish at the George. It's much better that way. We get the walking done, and then there's a chance to have some refreshment. We've had a few, shall we say, celebrities on previous tours, and Mickey has been one of them. Legendary goalkeeper Brian King came on another one. Former chairman Jeff Burnage, he came on the very first one. And it's being a tour guide is something that sits well with me because, you know, my favourite subject of all is Millwall Football Club. So why not put a tour together? It's about the first 25 years of our club. And the next one is on the 23rd of March. And people, if they want to get on for that one, just type in a search engine, Eventbrite Millwall history, and it will bring up the relevant page. It's good fun. We have a laugh. It's not all about fact. It's fun and entertaining as well. So and you know, what else do you want to do at a weekend if Millwall are not playing? You want to go shopping? You want to get the DIY? No, come on a Millwall history and heritage tour. Job done.
Absolutely, and obviously, when this goes out, we'll put the
Oh,
link
put it
that
out before
in
the
the
23rd
description
of
and
March,
everything.
Stephen, will
And
you?
it will be out before then. I guarantee it'll be out before then. But in the meantime, we'll get that posted out as well, guys. Obviously, if you're interested in your history and would like to know a little bit more about the early days of Millwall Football Club and where our roots are, then obviously Rob's your man. And I say us podcast boys, we will be joining Rob. You've done it, so I'm going to say it. Mickey didn't really want to go out in the cold, so we're going to wait till it's a little bit warmer, I think. But all of us are really looking forward to it. Again, we're so far away from the
Yeah.
beginnings of Millwall, so it sounds fascinating to be able to go back and see
And you know,
where we're from, properly where we're from.
talking just now about the semi-finals. To think we got to a semi-final just 15 years. We got to an FA Cup semi-final just 15 years after first starting out. That's an incredible rise in short space of time. Also, people can also find us on Facebook. There is a Millwall History and Heritage site. There's also Out of the Blue online fanzine. Some people will remember the Out of the Blue fanzine, which was kind of a junior rival to the Lion Roars, and no one likes us, but it's now online and it's in a Facebook group.
Absolutely. Again, all the links will be in the descriptions for those guys. That I know it's interesting. We have a lot of listeners from different ages, sort of from right down from sort of the youth of today, if you will, right up to the older supporters. And I'm sure there's lots that would love to look back at memories and perhaps speak to like-minded supporters that remember things that others perhaps don't. So all of that stuff will go in the description again. We're more than happy to share that all those kind of pages and the event pages, and hopefully, keep people talking and get more people. As I say, the more people that are interested in, then you'll have to do more tours. But I'm sure you won't mind. Keep putting those out. I'm gonna carry on with a couple more questions. We've got a few more to go. This is an interesting one. I'm gonna say avoid the FA Cup for this question if possible. What would you say is the best away day you've had following the club?
Well, it's when we was in the top flight. We got up there for one season, and I know the very first game, Aston Villa, was a bit special. And then we had from memory, I think we had Norwich, QP, ha 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 ha, Middlesbrough, and then came the big one, Liverpool. That was the one. To actually go up there and play them in a league game,
Mm.
this was the team that dominated the 80s. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think they won the Football League Championship 4 times in that spell. FA Cups, League
Mm.
Cups, they were European champions for a couple of seasons. They were the team of the day, and to go up there and to nick a 1-1 draw. Now that was my best away day for sure.
And am I right in saying, if memory serves me well from hearing stories from my dad and other fans about that day, am I right in saying that we kind of ruffled a few feathers, that they didn't quite like that little old Millwall come went to
Yeah,
Liverpool and gave
yeah,
them a little
because
bit of a
the
game?
establishment, the top end of the establishment, and um, we scored first as well. It was just we were riding on the crest of the wave. We got momentum from the season we got promoted. We were champions the previous season in the second tier, and that momentum carried over until we lost 4-2 at Middlesbrough. That was our first defeat of the season. I think we might have been one of the last teams to lose. We might have been undefeated for so long. We might have been the last ones to do it. Um, I, and to go up there and you think the bubble's going to burst anytime soon, but it didn't. We went right through to
Mm.
the new year and a little bit beyond that. Then the wheels started to come off, as you would expect, as we run out of steam. But the Liverpool day was really special, very special, that one.
And interestingly, you mentioned there the establishment. Obviously, we all know that there is
Mm.
a
Mm.
hierarchy in the world of football nowadays. Any of those make your most disliked
Well,
opponent?
funny to talk about the establishment. Well, if you don't know already, if you come on the Millwall History and Heritage Tour, we could well have been part of that establishment. Things had been different, but I'm happy with the way they are. Uh, no, the aforementioned Crystal Palace. I think, um, Palace. Who the fuck are Palace? It's just no, no. They're the to me they're the ones.
And interesting. This is an interesting question because I often feel like it depends what era you're from, dependent on how you answer this question. I'm assuming Palace will be one of your answers to this, but your
Mm.
top three rivals. Now that can be whether you dislike them, that can be whether you enjoy playing them, and it's a bigger atmosphere. Who would you say? Who would
Uh,
you say make your top three?
well, it'd be Palace, Charlton, and West Ham, I guess. I mean, um, we don't play them so much these days for various reasons. I mean, we're in a
Mm,
division that those other three teams aren't in at the moment. But they would be the ones that, you can't say QPR's a rivalry, can you? Really, the upstarts from West London. Um, it was great watching that goal Jed scored there a couple of years ago with the opening day of the season, wasn't it? That was a cracking
mm.
atmosphere, that as well.
I think, going off topic a little bit, but on that game, I think that was. I think people realize just how important
Yeah,
perhaps football is to people.
yeah.
COVID was difficult for a lot of people for various reasons. A lot of struggles, and that sense of being back
It,
meant a
it
lot
did,
to a lot of
and
people.
COVID really affected our football club. I think more than quite a lot of clubs,
Mm,
because without the fan base there, teams are now turning up winning at an empty den, and that carried on.
mm,
It carried on, and then we had the Blackburn debacle. We lost the chairman. Um, there's a lot of people at the club with their chins on the floor in that dressing room. So um, eventually, I'm sure the new coach will make the necessary changes and breathe a bit of new life into the football team. But first of all, we've got to stay up.
Absolutely, and I think just on the COVID piece before we move on, I think up until that point we'd beat Forest, didn't we? I think the week before that COVID kind of struck, Matt Smith hat trick, and we were well on our way. I think we may have even made the top six in at that point, or we were seventh and a couple of points off, and we were going through like a train. And I think COVID had a lot more of an
Yeah,
impact, as you say, on our club than perhaps others. And as you said, Jed, that goal at QPR, it meant a lot to a lot of people. It's interesting that you mentioned that, because some people have that as one of their favourite ever moments because of the fact that it was that
yeah,
people were
that's
back, they were
right.
with
Yeah,
their friends, people
yeah,
that you go to games with and things like that. So, no, very, very special goal. It's an interesting question, and I love this question because I've asked this off the camera and on the camera to a lot of people, and you get very very varied answers. If you could change anything about Millwall, whether it be things from the past, things currently,
there's a couple of
what would
things.
it be?
In a perfect world, if I had a magic wand, I'd try to get people to lower their expectations of our football club. You know, uh,
Hmm,
sorry to say this, folks, but we yo-yo between the second and third tier. That's what we do. That's in our DNA. I mean, this one season, perhaps, wouldn't it be nice if one season we could actually get to the final of the playoffs in this league? Wouldn't that be?
hmm.
Wouldn't that to do that? That would be
Absolutely, absolutely.
an amazing achievement.
Hmm,
Was we've never done it
hmm.
before. We've
It
got to the
would.
semi-final two, three times, but it's
Hmm.
it's expectations. That's when we sign players in the close season and then all of a sudden we're a top six team again. Yeah, it's just it, it makes me smile. And the other thing is, fill those two corners in where the home fans are. That would be great, wouldn't it?
See, I have a thought about that. I've always thought that would be quite a good idea to have the corners filled in. Interestingly, sort of spoke to other supporters from other clubs that visit the Den, and they love that it's the four stands. It's not the
Mm.
sort of bowl arena that you get at other clubs. For example, off the top of my head, like a Sunderland, for example, or Leicester. Leicester's a prime example. We're going
Yeah.
there in a few weeks. Um, but I think it would be interesting, especially if we, as you say, if we were to have a season where we were really going for it and got into the playoffs and made it, to have the corners filled in, especially as you say at the home end, would be quite something. And on expectation, as I said earlier, today's football, today's world is all about it's completely different. Everyone wants success immediately, and if you don't, you change your manager. You go out and buy four players, and you do this and you do that. You change your backroom staff, and I think whilst I know, and I think a lot of supporters know, we know who we are. There is a hint of there's a lot of people now that are thinking, oh, we've been close to the top six. We should be doing it. That's never going to work. That's never going to be who we are. We're going to need a flash in the pan season to do
Yeah,
it.
I mean, maybe the filling those two corners in is probably. I don't know if it's a knee-jerk reaction because of our attendances at the moment, at the highest they've been in 50 years. I mean, 16,000 we're averaging.
Mm,
That's. I know
mm,
attendances are up
very good.
everywhere, and if you look at the attendances in the championship, we're still down there in the bottom six. But to average 16,000, that's it's got to go back quite a long few years before we've done anything like that. And
Mm,
I know there's been a lot of disquiet recently about foreign fans coming to the Den. Um, don't get me started on that. These
yep.
these are the guys that are paying money for a ticket. They're spending money in the club shop. They're buying drinks and food in the concourses. Um, and people saying that, well, it doesn't add to the atmosphere. Well, if they weren't there, you'd have an empty seat. Well, that doesn't add to the atmosphere either, does it? And the last time I looked, those empty seats, they didn't
I,
weren't doing much shouting.
no, I think there's definitely a balance to be had. I think that ultimately to be successful, you need to
Yeah,
maximize revenue
especially a
streams
club like
as a
us.
football
And
club.
you know, years
And
ago, going back to before
yes,
segregation, there used to be when your team was playing away, you went and watched somebody else, a local team, like the floating supporters, which again
mm,
gave a club a little bit of extra revenue. That doesn't happen so much now amongst the fans of English clubs because of segregation. Uh, but if we can get money from the tourists, then I'm all for it.
absolutely. And to wrap up, a couple more questions. I'm going to talk about a little bit of
Mm.
memorabilia now. Firstly, and you may not own this on the particular shirt, you may well do. What would you say is your favourite shirt of all
When I
time?
come in, we were wearing the blue and white kit, as I mentioned before. But for me, my favourite
Hmm.
was the white kit, the all white kit, Benny Fenton's days, and we missed out on promotion to the top flight in 1971-72 just by a point. There was no three teams that went up then; it was just the two. And we played in that kit for a few seasons before and after that. Now, that was always my favourite kit for sure.
And finally, what's the best piece of Millwall
My
memorabilia that you
program
currently own?
collection. It's a bit of a sore point, really, because we don't have programs anymore. We have a very good second best, but the program was kind of an institution. You know, it was a regular. I mean, the amount of times I bought a program, tucked it in my pocket, and I didn't read it. You know, but it was still a program. Um, it was your
Yeah.
it was your memory from the day. And I got stacks of programs, inherited a load of programs. A lot of those programs I inherited have been written in because people used to put the scores in or put the team changes in. It was a massive do, you know. I suppose that people don't put the scores in a program nowadays is because you have all the information at your fingertips on your mobile phone. But it was like memorizing,
Mm.
creating a memory. I suppose that's why they do it. You know, back to the old dead used to come out the ground, walking down towards Ilderton Road, and there was newspaper vendors telling you they've got all the half-time scores. This is when the game's finished. They used to cry out all the half times. Now you get a goal in a second on your phone, up and down the country, all 92 clubs.
I think we obviously spoke before we come on about the programs. I think it's a
Mm.
shame the club don't do them anymore. It's certainly something. Me as a kid, I loved having a program as well, and it's nice to look back on some of them. It was always you sort of not. I know you have your memories,
Yeah,
but it's a
sure.
memento,
Yeah,
isn't it,
yeah,
of the
yeah.
game? You'd go and that's what you brought home. That's what you brought home with you. Rob, first guest of the new series. Thank you very much for your time, your memories. Thanks for sharing your details of the tour that you do. As I said earlier, we will obviously when this goes out, we'll post the links with it. We'll get something out before this goes out as well to make sure that anybody that is interested in coming along on the tour, I say we'll be doing it. We will be doing
Yeah,
it as well. So we might have a
yeah,
couple of
sure. Yeah.
fans along with us. But any final
No,
words
just a big
from
thank you.
yourself, Rob?
And the pleasure was all mine tonight, Stephen. Thank you so much.
No, it's you're more than welcome. As I say, Rob is the first guest on our series two of Who Are You this
Who
season.
are you?
If you are interested in coming onto the show, uh, drop us a message. Me personally, drop the pod a message and we can sort out a recording. I'm sure Rob would agree. It's very straightforward with it all pretty much sorted relatively quickly and the links all easy to use. So we'll get all that. We can get all that sorted with you. Check us out on YouTube, on Instagram, on Twitter, on TikTok, on Facebook. We're across the lot. And as always, and the message will always be,
Come on, you
come on, you
lions.
Lions.